Today we are going to do the bearing knuckle housing assembly. So here are the parts. The left is the bear housing, middle top the sector rod, middle bottom the sector gear, top right is the steering wheel lock rod, middle right is the sector rack, and the bottom is the retainer spring and the set screw. You want to put a little bit of grease on these various pieces that slide. Got a small amount of grease. Put on this shaft here. And then take my knuckle, and this is the back side. This can only go one way. There. Before you slide it in, make sure this little spring is in place. That provides a little bit of tension on this. Now you'll notice this hole here. This piece goes into that hole with the groove heading this way. And you'll see it in place. The trick to this whole thing is that everything has to go together somewhat at the same time so it all meshes. And the reason it does is because of that little groove. This end of the spring goes in the groove at the bottom of the steering wheel lock rod. I have placed this small block underneath the other end of this shaft to keep it from falling out and giving my hands free to place the gear on, to put the spring on the end here and slide the key rack into this position. I'm putting a small amount of lube on the end of the gear, which goes there. So here's my little spring, and here's the rod, and I found that this has to be in place first, or else you can't get it on that groove when you've got the gear on. I have it out of the way. And you are rotating the rod so the slot here corresponds to this arc. And now we have our pin in place and the gear going on. You can take your thumb and forefinger and push that into place. Then rotate it so you can get the little catch in place right there. So now the spring is essentially in the correct position, and the last thing we do is slide in our key rack. There. So now hopefully we can just rotate the whole assembly. Our key sliders in place. Our rod's in place, and everything's going to rotate a little bit further down. It rotates so that little tab goes into place, and there you have it. A little bit of a juggling act, but not that bad of a deal. So now you'll see how our rack lines up properly. The flat spot in this rod lines up properly. Our spring is in the groove of this rod. Our little retainer is in this slot properly. And when we rotate, we can see that our spring is in place for this small screw that holds everything in place, which has a 1/4 inch head. You can take this and tighten that into place. So there you have the completed unit like it's supposed to be. See how it rotates like so? This is where your key lock assembly will mesh further in the assembly process. We can also seat the gear a little bit further, and I've found that you can do it without tools. Just squish really hard with your thumb and forefinger and it sets deep enough that everything's in place. So that's how all that deal works.